Hello everyone. It's been about a week since I got back from Porcfest, so I just wanted to do um, a little bit of a review with my thoughts about Porcfest 2014 as a first-time attendee. I know there's been quite a few articles, and LinkedIn Arthur did a good video about the differences between this year and maybe some of the previous years in terms of the speakers and that sort of thing. And I just kind of wanted to supplement that with my take and a few of my observations about kind of how it went for me, and also what I thought about the lectures. So just right off the bat when you get there, it's definitely positive. It's it's kind of a culture shock, but in a really good way, because you walk in there and everybody's wearing t-shirts like "Don't tread on me" and like Snowden truth and whatever, and carrying all the guns. It's really cool, and there's an instant sense of camaraderie and community because of that common bond and common interest with liberty and just for the free market and kind of anti-government vibe going on. And it's so cool because and then because you walk around and then just kind of like hear snippets of people's conversations, and they're all talking about cryptocurrencies and how long it will be before we can New Hampshire can secede and become its own Libertopia or whatever. So so that's really cool. I really enjoyed that sort of sense of community. It definitely gives hope to people who feel very isolated. There were a lot of people from different countries. I met a gentleman from Australia. There was somebody from England, a guy from Belgium to talk about cryptocurrencies. I'm sure, and it just a lot of different countries. I didn't talk to a ton of people because I'm a little bit shy, but so it's really cool. It's really cool for them. They've never seen, some have never held a gun before, so and that's really interesting. Just kind of that cross cultural aspect and international, because we get there and there's no national prejudice. We all just we all just want to be left alone and be free of all of our respective governments. So so that's really cool, and there's a really unique sense of community at Porcfest that I was sort of anticipating, but I didn't. It wasn't quite what I was expecting, and it hit me in a more profound and a more kind of overwhelming way than what I was expecting. And it was just so cool, just to be surrounded with people who love liberty as much as I do. And I think that's probably the biggest draw for Porcfest, is just to be around other people who love freedom and want to talk about freedom and want to debate, the best way to get there, and how it what it would look like, and all of the intricacies involved in the free market and economics and history and political science and cryptocurrencies, technology. That was really neat. As far as the lectures went, I didn't go to as many as I was expecting because I was a little disappointed in the quality of the lectures. A lot of people didn't seem to be super well prepared or very professional, and I was kind of surprised by that. I'd heard that David Friedman been there last year and Michael Huemer, and I kind of was expecting, kind of that kind of philosophical, intellectual level, and there's nothing like that this year, but that, at least not that I saw. But it was interesting. I went to a couple that I think are worth mentioning. The first one was, there was an actor who went over how to improve the libertarian image, and how to do like TV interviews, and how to use media in persuading people, because I guess there's a book that said that libertarians, are terrible at making emotional appeals, which is true, and is definitely something that could be improved upon. I know I don't have a tendency to use very many emotional arguments, because I respond better to logical arguments, and I think a lot of libertarians are that same way. The whole reason we became libertarians is because we care about, the facts and data and statistics and logic and all that, and that's kind of how you get to be a libertarian usually. I mean, maybe some people would be persuaded by, like, Ayn Rand of the emotional morality side of it, but I think that's probably doubtful, but that's very many. So that was really interesting. Definitely something that is needed. I always appreciate tips on how to make my arguments more persuasive to more people. So that was really interesting. He went over like how to breathe properly. Not sure how much that sunk in, but it's definitely interesting. Yeah, so that one was actually, he did a couple. I went to 2 of his lectures, and they were both interesting and good. And he was, very professional in his presentation, so I appreciated that. Another one of the better presenters was Bill Buford, and I almost hate to say that, because I wasn't a huge fan, but he did bring up a few interesting things, and he was a much better presenter than a lot of the other people, just from a rhetorical standpoint. He talked a lot about character, and how living our beliefs is important, and how it's not just enough to question authority, but to live it out, to question our obedience to that authority, to change our behavior. And while that is convicting to a certain extent, it also, I mean, everybody's to a degree hypocritical, but Bill Buford seems to, at least most of the people I talk to be particularly hypocritical in that he's like a defense contractor. He works over in Iraq with the military. And so, he's talking about how if we had character, we would stand up, and we would resist the government, we would not pay our taxes, and yet he doesn't even really live that out. So it's hard to get a feel for how to make it practical when apparently it isn't practical. So that was a little confusing just on the application side. I mean, maybe it was just like, hopefully in the future this will be more practical. And I I hope it is, because civil disobedience can be effective on a very large scale. Of course, there's very significant consequences to specific members of that group, but if enough people didn't pay their taxes, it would make a difference. But how much you're willing to risk in order to defy the government is, I think, a personal question, and not really sure. I think it's interesting though to bring up that moral dilemma of libertarianism, even if it was not satisfactorily resolved during the lecture. He also talked about how limited government is not really an option. And although I did not really appreciate his rhetorical style on this point, I think he could have used some of the tips on being a little bit more empathetic, because I think some of the things he said would be very unpopular in a normal person context. Maybe you can be a little bit more crass amongst libertarians about your hatred of police officers and such, but I was a little turned off by that. I thought it was unnecessary and unnecessarily inflammatory and not really constructive on an intellectual level. Just kind of insulting people. But I did think his points on limited government not being a valid option were interesting, especially if you know a lot of minarchists or small government libertarians, constitutional conservatives and stuff. Because I think he's right. I think, and he's obviously not the first to bring up that point, but I think it's worth being made about how a limited government is not sustainable in any way, how governments always expand, and that's their natural tendency. They're never self-limiting, and to expect even a constitutional republic to ever be the ideal form of government is really not sustainable. I mean, people say that, anarcho-capitalism would be unstable, but a limited republic is definitely more so in that, just Lord Acton is right and always has been. So I thought that was interesting. Some people have mentioned the abortion panel that ceased that neglected to be as contentious as advertised. I was definitely going into it expecting to hear a lot of good debate, and it ended up all the panelists knew each other and were friends, and nobody really wanted to disagree about anything. So it really that was pretty anticlimactic. I was pretty disappointed with the abortion panel. And I was just infuriated. There were two girls on the panel, and not to be sexist or anything, but just for the sake of identifying them, one of the ladies at one time, PETA stuff and animal rights came up, and this one lady said, "Oh, well, I'm sure that, dolphins could be as smart as people." And everybody just kind of looked at her. And it was just sad. I don't know. And then the other lady in her opening presentation for the debate said that she wanted a world with no unwanted children. And that was another thing where everybody just kind of looked around and said, okay, so in order to get to a world with no unwanted children, we should kill them all? What about the children who are already born? I mean, how can you advocate basically widespread euthanasia just because you think somebody else's life isn't worth living? That was pretty bad, I think. I mean, I'm all for all children being wanted, but but I don't think the way to do that is through abortion or advocating or encouraging abortions. So it was interesting. It was kind of interesting. Ben Stone, who's the bad Quaker, was on was on the panel, and he did a good job. I liked him. He was interesting. I think he does mostly podcasts, and I haven't listened to him at all, but he clearly knew what he was talking about, and I was okay with a lot of his arguments, and I thought it was interesting. The solutions he expected the market to present, kind of in the context of abortion alternatives, like, once you remove the red tape for adoption, once you stop paying for people's abortions, you know, if a woman can make a lot of money by adopting out her child, abortion is much less likely to be an issue, and there's a whole supply and demand and economics on the kind of baby market that gets to be a little bit weird to talk about, but I did think that was interesting, discussing possible market solutions, but there wasn't as much ethical debate as I was expecting, not the typical arguments, because we hear abortion debates all the time, and I was expecting a little bit more, and there's a long line of people. The people asking questions actually had more pertinent points, I think, or at least, were willing to present the usual arguments, more so than the panelists were. So it could have been better, but I don't know. At least it triggered some discussion amongst the audience, so that was worthwhile, I suppose, and it was fun talking about that after. There was a panel. This was a little bit less on the intellectual side and more on the practical side, but there was a panel on the Free State Project and trying to convince people to move to New Hampshire. And Jason Sorens was on the panel, and he is the guy who came up with the idea of the Free State Project. He's a professor at Dartmouth now, and he was really interesting, just talking about kind of the history of how everything came about and why they chose New Hampshire. And he talked a little bit about the contract. He said that he talked about almost trying to soften the terms of the contract, so it's more well, if you're thinking about moving to New Hampshire, you should sign up because we really want to get to the 20,000. So that was a little interesting. I don't know. I'm not sure how legitimate it is to sign up if you're not really serious about moving, but it was really interesting. It was interesting to hear about that. I hadn't really considered the terms of the contract, or how sure you needed to be that you're going to move to sign up. So that was an interesting discussion. I didn't sign up while I was there, but after I'd been home for a couple days, I decided that New Hampshire was a good enough place that I would seriously consider moving there. So I did sign up for the Free State Project. After I took a little tour of New Hampshire to see, check out kind of all the locations and see what was going on, to make sure that it's something I would actually be interested in, somewhere I would like to live, besides just the fact that it's really the only place that's, at least, in the United States, the only place that really is moving in the direction of liberty. So that was really interesting. Jason Sorens was interesting. They did say that it's about 10 degrees warmer on the seacoast, so I definitely made a mental note of that. My favorite speech during the week was the keynote on Saturday by Jeffrey Tucker. And I know Jeffrey Tucker's a little bit controversial. He doesn't normally do a lot of super deep intellectual discussions, but I really liked listening to him. He's definitely upbeat, and he really does a good job with the empathy thing, and with staying positive and making the message of libertarianism and the free market really positive and very appealing all the time, and not ever wavering from that and kind of enthusiastic optimism. So I like him for that. I think he's a very good ambassador for liberty, especially to people who are not already liberty-minded. So I liked his speech. I think it's interesting to observe kind of the rhetorical style and try to incorporate some of that when I'm talking to people who might be a little bit resistant to free market and laissez-faire economics. So I thought his speech was the best. Depending on how you feel about Jeffrey Tucker, that may tell you kind of how the lectures were. I don't know what it was like in previous years, but that was kind of my take on it. I want to go to the Liberty Forum because I want to see New Hampshire in the winter, partly, and also I think it might be a little bit more kind of intellectually oriented versus more social. Maybe Porcfest is a little bit more on the social side, and not that there was a ton of partying going on, but but I don't know. I wasn't very impressed with the lectures, so maybe next year it'll be better. I wanna figure out who's in charge of the lectures and see if I can make some suggestions. I don't know, so we'll see. I'll try to make it next year. It was really good. I had a lot of fun. So yeah, Porcfest was a good time. And if you have any questions, let me know, comments, or clarification. I think that's it. Thanks for watching.